Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Orange County School Board's work session, which has been scheduled for today, Tuesday, September 17th, 2024, for the purpose of discussing School Board Policy FF, naming and renaming school buildings and facilities, and an ESE update. The public will not have an opportunity to participate in this work session to provide public comment because it's not a regularly scheduled school board meeting. No action will be taken, and there'll be no open public comment. Again, we thank you for being here. Our board members, all that are attending in person. I don't think we have anyone calling in. Let me check with the superintendent or Mr. Palmerini. All right, thank you. We will begin our meeting with a moment of silence, and then I invite you to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And now for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, before we get started, let me call on our General Counsel, Mr. Palmerini, for an announcement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pursuant to Section 286.011, subsection 8, and in accordance with School Board Policy BEC, an entity may meet in private with its attorney to discuss pending litigation to which the entity is currently a party before a court or administrative agency, provided certain conditions are met, including the requirement that a transcript of the executive session will be made a part of the public record upon conclusion of litigation. In this case, I'm requesting the school board's advice concerning pending litigation styled United Healthcare Services, Inc. versus the School Board of Orange County, Florida. I'm going to request a meeting today, Tuesday, September 17th, following the work session. The executive session will be in a closed meeting held in conference room E at the ELC and will take approximately 1 hour. I hope it's shorter than that. A notice has been drafted for posting. Those in attendance will be Teresa Jacobs, Chair, Angie Gallo, Vice Chair, school board members Maria Salamanca, Alicia Ferrant, Pam Gould, Vicki Elaine Felder, Karen Castor-Dental, Melissa Bird, Maria Vasquez, the Superintendent, myself, Vivian Kokotis, Associate General Counsel, Roberto Pacheco, Chief Operations Officer, David Wheeler, Senior Director, Procurement Services, and a court reporter. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Palmerini. All right. In just a minute, I'll turn the meeting over to Dr. Vasquez, but the first item on our agenda is 4.01, Policy FF, which is naming or renaming schools, buildings, and facilities. Dr. Vasquez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We currently have a practice in place about renaming our current buildings and policy and facilities, as well as a policy that specifically speaks to the buildings, the schools, and the other facilities. We've had requests to name parts of buildings and have revisited our practice in that area and felt we really needed to revisit the policy, be able to revisit the policy to ensure that we were being consistent and aligned with the board's wishes as we look to rename our facilities and buildings. So I'd like to turn it over now to General Counsel Palmerini, who will walk us through the revisions to the policy.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent, members of the board. Thank you to Sylvia Schaefer for driving the policy for me over there from the computer. We wanted to just go through the red line of this very briefly, explain some rationales for why we did what we did. We changed the title, renaming schools, buildings, facilities, and then we added real property. Real property actually refers to the dirt on the ground, in case we wanted to name the dirt or some portion of our property. So that's why you will see real property in there. And then going down to Subsection 2, with respect to new schools, again, we added real property. The superintendent shall present 3 recommended names based upon input from community stakeholders for the board's review. We will define community stakeholders a little bit further in the policy, so you will see that. And then this is the addition, new schools, buildings, facilities, or real property may not be named after persons still living. We had a comprehensive and I would say spirited discussion in cabinet with respect to those issues. And with respect to buildings, renaming new buildings or renaming existing buildings, we didn't think that the person should be alive, but you will see further down that we have a new paragraph with respect to existing spaces like media centers, cafeterias, cafetoria, that we will recommend that be named after persons who are still alive, assuming that they, of course, have some substantial connection to the school. So, but with respect to new buildings and new schools and new facilities, we are recommending that it not be named after persons still living. And if you could scroll down to 3 for me, Sylvia, thank you.
Can we hold for a moment there?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Member Gould, followed by Member Byrd, followed by me. Member Gould, you're recognized.
What was the rationale for not naming something for someone who was still alive?
Usually you would like to get away from that person's life and take a look at it as a whole to see what their contributions were, if there were any issues that have cropped up with respect to that person's life. So, for example, you could have a facility named after an administrator that was still alive, and then after you've named the school, something comes out where they've been charged criminally for some reason, or some sort of issue like that pops up, and it's very hard to rename the school. We would have to bring it back. We would have to be some sort of emergency reason. Again, this is the board's policy. This is our recommendation as cabinet after discussing it. But that was the thing. We wanted a comprehensive look at the person's life before we named after a new school or a new facility after them.
So would there be a way, you can't do it in terms of years, but maybe, substantial legacy to the community? I'm just thinking there are people alive that we may want to honor while they're alive versus not alive. And I don't know. I understand that cautionary tale, but there's several elder folks in our community that if we ever thought of naming something, it would be nice to have them there when it happened versus not happen, not have them there and do it in memoriam.
So let me pose this as a suggestion. Sylvia, could you scroll down to number 3? That's existing facilities, but you'll see language in there that says existing schools, facilities, or real property may not be named after persons still living. And then we add the caveat, the board may make an exception to this subsection by a supermajority vote.
Okay.
So what we could do is we could take that language, if it's the board's desire, and move it up to also be included in the new facilities, et cetera. And so we could put it in both places.
Okay. All right. I think if you put that in both places, it would satisfy the flexibility of it.
Thank you, Member Gould. Thank you. Member Byrd?
Then we know.
Thank you. Was that, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
Okay.
I like our new signal for our...
Oh, yeah. Okay, it's not easier to press.
on and off.
But, yeah, for those of you out there, we can at least tell when it's on. So that's a big step. Thank you.
Fun fact, that was 3D printed.
Get out of
No.
here. Cool. By our own employee? Oh, cool. All right. Who is that person?
That is awesome.
David? Well, no, a different David? Chris?
Pretty cool.
All right. Chris, I'm bringing you some cookies. All right. If I brought them ahead of time, that might be misperceived, but I think I can reward him after the fact. Okay, thank you. And they're less than whatever it is, $50, I promise. So let me go to Member Byrd.
Thank you, Chair. Member Gould touched on my question, and I think that adding that language will clarify that because we have had to change building names for various reasons, so it can be done if we ever had to do that. But I would agree that there are some people in our community that have made significant contributions, and it'd be nice to do it while they're still alive. So I had a question about the real property. When you talk about like the dirt, do you mean like, would that include like football fields? I'm trying to understand what the reasoning behind adding that to the policy was.
So football stadiums or stadia, you will see my predilection for Latin a little bit later in this policy. That is in the separate portion of the policy that deals with or the separate policy that deals with naming rights. But it could be potentially naming a field. It could be naming like a little garden, like the Melissa Byrd Memorial Garden at whatever school that we have. That's sort of the idea there too.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Member Byrd. My question is probably moot at this point, but just from a rationale standpoint, I hadn't really thought about the situation that you referenced, hypothetical situation, but I can certainly see where that would be a legitimate concern, and honestly coming back and making the determination if it was serious enough to change the whole thing be extremely awkward. It's kind of like endorsing somebody and then something happens and you're unendorsing, which is worse than endorsing in the first place. Not that I've experienced that, but hypothetically it could happen. But at the same time, I was then wondering why that rationale wouldn't apply to existing buildings. Was there some reason why we didn't share the same concerns about naming existing buildings, or was that a compromise?
I don't know that it was a compromise. I think.
I don't mean it in a bad sense.
Yeah, no. I think just in, this is why we bring them to you all, because this is probably should have been in both places from the get-go, but it will be in both places now. So
yeah, I personally, I think it should be the same in each situation, whichever direction we would go. I just think existing buildings to me aren't that much different than new buildings, but I was just curious about that. Let me go to Member Farrand, and welcome, Vice Chair.
Thank you, sir.
Let me just for a moment, we are on policy FF, and we have only covered the first section, but and we're talking right now about the naming of new facilities versus existing facilities after living versus deceased or passed. Okay, Member Farrand, welcome. Or you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So definitely curious why. I mean, I understand the rationale, I guess, of naming one of our facilities after someone who is alive, and then the worry of what could happen or with their name. However, like I have two schools in my area that are named after. One was a coach who had a huge legacy for Boone High School, and one was an incredible first principal of Blankner, and our gym is named after her. And those are people who are still alive and were able to, or they were alive at least when they were named. And so I think if there's a way for us to say, like, if they've given a certain amount of time, maybe within our public schools, they've proven themselves, lived a life of integrity and poured into our schools, our students. For me, it seems, I don't know, I feel like it seems silly to say that it's not allowed, but then later on somebody would have to read that, oh, well, actually it could be if it's by a majority vote. So for me, I think it would make more sense to say that it could be somebody that is currently alive, but these are the criteria that it would have to be. They'd have to have worked with us for a certain amount of time or contributed a certain amount of their, efforts and work with our students, either as a principal or like a coach in this instant. But something in that, I think somebody who has worked for us, who's alive. I mean, they've obviously gone through all of their screenings, and we've trusted them enough to take care of our students. So for that reason, I think I would love to see it say that there's like provisions or like certain criteria. If you are alive and you want their name to be used, there would be criteria for that.
So just to clarify, I think the change you're looking for wouldn't be different than what the board's discussing, but it would be the way it's phrased so that people didn't see you can't and then later say unless. Put it
right.
Yeah, which I think I think that I agree with that. I think the more we can make our policies really clear and people are not confused or stop reading, I think that's a good idea. Mr. Palmerini, your thoughts?
So we did have a discussion about, I think, the situation that Member Front brought up. This is a long-term employee, and whether being a long-term employee solely, without any further contributions to the community, you just were there for 35 years, is that enough to name an existing school after you? And that was a pretty spirited discussion in cabinet with regard to that. So the criteria would have to be, I would think, more than just long-term employment. It would have to be some sort, and it's hard to come up with, did they, give of their time volunteering? That would have to be a discussion of what specific criteria it would be. And would it be something that you all would want directly in the policy, or would that be something that you all would delegate to staff to come up with the criteria?
Member Farrar?
I think for me, if we just made it more of a broad statement of they need to have a prolonged history, like work history with us, but then also what have they contributed in a way that is has really affected our community, not just one school, but our community as a whole. Like, what have they done to really be deserving, in a sense, to have their name on a school? And so I think if we just had more of a broad statement, and then that's something where maybe it could just state, like, if they're alive and they've got these criteria, it would be discussed at the board, and it would be by a board majority. But maybe have that in that same line that we're discussing, where it says may not be named after a person still living unless something like that. Yes, unless they have contributed, blah, 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 and it has been discussed at a board meeting and is voted upon by the majority or supermajority, whatever we're calling it.
All right, let's hear from Superintendent. I've got Member Byrd next, but do you want to weigh in beforehand to help? Huh? Yeah, you sure? Okay. Member Byrd?
I was just going to say, in the line number 3 that says, any renaming of a facility after a person who is deceased shall ensure the person had a substantial connection. We could put and contribution, substantial connection and contribution to the school, building, facility, or real property while still alive. I think that pretty much sums up, I think, what Member Ferrant was saying, in my opinion, that they have a connection to the school and that they made a significant contribution, or substantial is what it says. For me, I think that would be enough of a description of what we're looking for. And I also think that if it comes before the board, that it's already gone through stakeholder and, all the other requirements that it says. And if it comes to the board, and if the board feels like they agree that that person has made that much of a connection, they'll vote for it or they won't. So that would be my comments on that.
Dr. Vasquez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Cabinet had extensive discussion on this topic, and specifically around our past practice of allowing buildings to be renamed. But they still felt strongly, even though that had happened in the past, as with so many of our policies, we do change them to be able to make the process more relevant. That's why we came to the agreement of the plaque that would still allow us the opportunity to recognize someone who is alive during their time, acknowledge their contributions, and then, if they pass and they want to do more and rename the building, they could. But there was a lot of angst around someone who is living. Renaming a building is bigger than the plaque. And we thought that with the plaque, we would still be able to honor them, have a ceremony, and not have to worry that something may come out that would then require us to back out of that agreement. But certainly, if the board wants us to include individuals that are currently alive in the naming, we will. But I wanted you to know that we've changed policies based on past practice and changing what we've done in the past moving forward because we thought it was a better way of doing business.
All right, thank you, Superintendent. So my thoughts on this is if we are going to include the exception and if we're going whether we include it in both places or not, although I've heard definitely some interest in making it uniform, which I can support. I do think that Member Ferrant's suggestion of not saying we can't and then saying there's an exception. I can argue both, but I do think the alternative language of saying they can't unless, and it's all, you could do it all in the same sentence, basically, that we can't do this unless a supermajority of the board approves it and the individual and have the substantial connection or whatever we want to put in there. I also agree that language should be very broad and vague, because if we try to nail down the number of years or this, that, and the other, I can see us coming back and like saying, well, we gave it to this person because they met this, but this person's done more and we didn't. So I think the board ought to have that discretion when they're making that determination that it does or doesn't. So that would be my preference, although this isn't a hill I would die on, so I really want to know the preference of the board, and we can do that at the end, or we can make a decision at this point in time. I would prefer we try to make that decision now because we're on the subject. So, so let me start with how many of us here would prefer that we change this draft language at this point in time. We're not voting on this at this point in time, but to say that the board's discretion to name a building or facility or other after a person still living would apply to both the existing and new if it's a supermajority. So how many would agree that whatever language we have for existing, we should have with new? Let me put it this way. Anybody disagree? Let's go with that. Okay, nobody disagrees that. Okay. Member Felder wants to disagree. No, she wants to opine. Go ahead.
Okay, if I'm understanding correctly, and I know that we probably do have, like there's a building on Jones High School's campus is named after a person that's still living, but she's contributed quite a bit she's a graduate of the school and has done quite a bit and very much of a great assistance in terms of communicating the history of a school because she knows it. However, I do know that there are buildings, like I have a school named after a woman who was a teacher, and I think she was a principal, but she's now deceased. And they named a little elementary school after her. But then I do know that usually, I just kind of want to discuss it, I guess, there usually buildings are named after people who are deceased, or if they've given a great amount of finances, I should say, or something. And they've done some really wonderful things for the district or the school. But I just wanted to kind of to say that to keep us from just naming buildings after persons because they did one or two things, but it needs to be something extraordinarily. Is that the same thing this is saying? If we decide to do,
Member Felder,
Yeah.
I apologize. I took a moment when Vice Chair arrived to bring her up to speed. So let me
Okay.
do that, because if I were you walking in and trying to assess this without the benefit of the discussion. So the current language would not allow the naming of schools or other facilities after somebody who's still alive, unless it required a super majority. But it would allow, super majority. But it would allow the naming of existing buildings after the living by a regular majority. What we are proposing is whether the building is a brand new building or an existing building, the same criteria should apply. So, generally speaking, we would not name a building after somebody's still alive. And there was some good thought behind that recommendation from the staff. And to be quite candid, the thought was a person may have a stellar record for supporting schools. We name it after them, and 10 or 20 years later, something changes, and we then question our decision. Whereas, once somebody is deceased, we have the full record of their life in order to make that decision. So that's the reason we would put an extra threshold on naming after the living.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that.
I thought you would be.
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
realized you didn't have the benefit of the whole discussion. So I don't think anybody is opposed to making that uniform and requiring a supermajority for naming after the living. The next question is changing the language, not so much the content, but to make it clearer, not saying you can't and then saying there's an exception, but making that clear all at once that you can't unless. And that's obviously, that's a debatable argument. How many board members would disagree with changing the language so that it says in order for us to, you have to have a supermajority if the individual is still living, as opposed to you can't, but you could?
Yeah, because I don't understand the difference between majority or supermajority. What's that?
Well, let me point out that to change the name of a building, I think, to change the name of a building, period, it has to come to the board. So the board has to approve by majority the change of a building right now. The question is, do we increase that threshold for the name of a building for those for an individual alive? I personally agree with it because I agree, I think, with the consensus. It's the wrong word because you said it was a heated discussion. But I do agree there should be a higher threshold for naming after someone who's alive. That's my personal feeling, again. So,
You said higher threshold, Chairman.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate? What do you mean higher threshold?
well, what we were reluctant to do is, no, I can't say because we haven't all spoken. What I was somewhat reluctant to do, and I think Mr. Palmerini was recommending, that we not try to specify the exact criteria, the number of years or what that contribution is specifically, But that we have broader terminology like we have here, that there has to be a substantial connection to the school. Another suggestion was a benefit to the community. So we come up with broader language. But if we do that, the question in front of us right now that I want to feedback before we move forward, advertise, and have our next meeting is, does the board agree that the language should be changed to reflect that we may, but only under this circumstance? And that circumstance, in this case, would be a supermajority versus a majority. Anybody, let me start with anybody disagree, because since we can't take a vote, anybody disagree with making that change in the way we describe it? Okay, I don't hear any objections to that. I think the last issue is, I think, is whether the language that you have down here, the board may make, obviously we're going to change that the supermajority would apply to a facility after a person who is living, who had a substantial connection to the school building, facility, real property, or the school. Should that language be expanded? And again, I think most everybody's going to agree, we don't want to specify exactly how that is, but should it say something broader than the school building? Member Front, you're recognized.
I just want clarification on the supermajority. What exactly are we? I know you're right. What would that number be? 'Cause I get that there's a difference.
6. That would be
6-2.
6.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like if we're discussing somebody that is alive, and I think there should be a higher criteria, and it should be a little more of a majority like that. So I think continuing that language to say a supermajority for someone who is currently alive and has these criteria, has passed these criteria, because I don't think we should just flippantly pick somebody just because we like them, or because maybe they've helped us in one way or another, but really somebody that we've really dug into and that we feel we can vouch for, somebody who they may be 90 years old, but they've contributed a ton and they've been a part of our community, but something that we want to do to honor them.
Okay, so Member Ferrant, just a minute ago I asked, is there anybody who disagrees with the supermajority? And I think everybody was okay with the supermajority. The other question that I had for the benefit of the administration for going forward is, should the criteria that we consider be substantial connection to the school, or should it be broader than that? And because you specifically had mentioned some broader criteria, but broader than this. So I definitely wanted to hear from you on that. So if you could opine on that, and then I have Member Byrd. Yes,
I think definitely they need to have some form of like huge connection with the school, where they have been giving and pouring their life and heart out for our children and our community. But also, what beyond just being the most amazing teacher or a great principal, what else have they been doing? And I think that's like, how have they helped shape maybe the community around them, the part of Orange County in that sense. So I think that would be, for me, not just having a title at a school for a prolonged period of time, but how have they really contributed to our community, would be my thoughts.
Regarding the first half of that, I think the word substantial is intended to mean a very large impact, but the second half of that, dealing with also an impact on the community, is, I think, the next question for the board. I'm really trying not to wordsmith, but I am trying to make sure we have enough direction that when we come back, we're less likely to find ourselves debating it. Let me go to Member Byrd, and I'm not sure which of the issues you're on, but it doesn't matter. Why don't you give us some input, and then we'll come back to this question.
Thank you. I was just going to suggest the possibility of adding community connection or contribution to the school building, facility, real property, or community, because I think there may be someone that has lifted up a community as well that has in turn helped our schools. I think that those are also people that we may at some point want to honor. So I think contribution to the community is also something that I'd like to see in there.
Okay, I'm gonna try this out for size. We could try to accomplish both by requiring that they have there's two ways we could do this. A substantial impact on the community that has had a positive impact on our schools. Or we could do, or they've had one or the other, or they've had both.
Okay.
So
And/or.
what I heard Member Ferrant looking for was both. What I hear Member Byrd suggesting is very, very close, because you're saying that that impact on the community has positively impacted our schools. So I think it's the same, which is different than saying either or. Like, you've done nothing for our schools, but you've done a great job over here with this issue. I personally wouldn't support that, because I still think naming after a school facility ought to be after somebody whose impact has substantially positively impacted. So that's where I would be. Yes. And is there any disagreement with the concept that we require that you also have an impact on the community and schools? Or, yeah, or it could be or, but then that would mean we conceivably could be naming after the community that hasn't impacted the school. Oh gosh, I was trying to keep it simple, but this one's not so simple. So, Member Feld, Member Byrd, you're finished, right? Okay, just Member Felder.
Yes, my only concern, I am in agreement with people, a person that has impacted the school, because in most of our communities, we have community buildings, we have all kinds of facilities within our city, our county, and our communities where people have made a lasting impression on the community. So we name buildings like county buildings, that we have recreational buildings. After people, I think that I am more inclined, of course I will go along with the majority of the board, but I'm more inclined, if we're going to name a school facility after someone, it needs to be someone who has impacted the schools in some way. And as Member Byrd said, sometimes that impact on the school has an impact on the community as well. But I am really more inclined to let the city, the communities name the buildings after people who have made large impacts on the community. But those persons that get school buildings named after them, school hallways or whatever, should be people who have had a lasting impact on the school. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got an idea for how we could do this, but Member Ferrant, based on what I'm hearing, I have an idea. Go ahead, Member Ferrant.
Just to maybe clarify what I'm hearing, the and or is really, I think what Member Byrd is saying is that they could be an employee of our public schools and contributing to our community, or they could be a community member who has vastly impacted our public schools. So not just made an impact in the community, but like someone, maybe not an employee, but someone who has made a huge impact on our public schools and really shaped and helped us lift up our public schools. So there's several different I think people that are popping up, or like different groups in my mind that have popped up that make a huge impact on our schools, but they're not employees. And so I can see where I would be supportive of that, the and or, but the criteria then is that they've made an impact on our public schools, not just in the community, but somehow have lifted up our community of public schools.
Okay. Anybody disagree with that? All right, we're all in agreement with that. Wording on that, Dr. Vasquez, we're going to leave it to your team. But I think that clarity, yeah, great. I don't have to rephrase it and mess it up. Good. Mr. Palmerini, or I'm sorry. Okay, Mr. Palmerini, we're back to you.
The superintendent just called my handwriting chicken scratch, so I'm going to take a second to recover from that. Going on to existing schools, buildings, facilities, or real property. One of the concerns that was raised in this particular portion is, what's the threshold for renaming of an existing school, existing facility? Is it 5 people coming in and getting the process started? So what we wanted to do is show some substantial support for a renaming of an existing school, building, facility, or real property. So we wanted, it says here, in order to rename an existing school, building, facility, or real property, community stakeholders, and we define that further on in the policy. Comprising at least 20% of the student population must indicate written support for such renaming. So as an example, and because I use round numbers, if the school has 1,000 students, we would expect 200 written indications of support for renaming the existing school, facility. I'm just going to use existing building for simplicity here. If that occurs, if we get 200 written supports in a school of 1,000, and such renaming then would then have to be approved by cabinet and the school advisory council. So we would want to have the school's advisory council demonstrating buy-in. I think the example that was used in cabinet was, let's say you get 200 kids in the school and they want to rename the school Taylor Swift Middle School, right? And so what that would do is the school advisory council would say, well, Taylor Swift's great and all, but she doesn't have a substantial connection to the school, so we're not going to rename it after her. So that would be a point of I hesitate to use the word choke point, but it would serve as a choke point. And then it would come to cabinet for their approval. And then if the cabinet approves, if school advisory council approves, the superintendent shall present the board with the existing name and one alternative. And then it says input on the alternative names from the school's community stakeholders shall be included in the presentation. And this was another concern, including the number and percentage of votes of each alternative. There have been times where it says this is in rank number 1, 2, and 3, but you don't have how many votes they got, what the percentage is. This would codify that the vote and the percentages would be in there. And then the rest of this is language that we just worked on, so I'm not going to restate it again. We know how to revise the language in accordance with the board's wishes, and we'll do so here.
All right, before I call on Member Byrd, for clarity, you are talking about under the existing schools.
Yes.
Okay. Going up to new schools, since the board is going to change the language for existing schools and new schools with regard to naming after living, would we need to also change the language under new schools to have the language you're talking about?
So the new schools it's a little bit different because you don't have an existing set of community stakeholders,
Gotcha.
right?
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. All right, Member Byrd. Whoever
Thank
just
you.
moved the slide up so I could read the existing, or the new schools, whoever did that, thank you. Thank you. That was helpful.
I just have a clarification question. I know that you also if we ever would get through the policy, you also have about individual rooms later on down. But so I'm trying to just wrap my head around how this will work, given specific examples that we're currently dealing with. So let's say there's interest in naming a press box after someone from adults within the district or the board or whatever, or, that would then have to be proposed to, like, how would this process work? Like, would you have to then go to all the students and say, this is what we'd like to do? We need to have your support. Do you see where I'm going with this?
No,
how
I
do
do
we
yeah.
work? How would this work out in real time? Like,
So-
how would we really do it?
With respect to the individual rooms, so using the press box as an example, that would be considered an individual room on campus. And so that's not one that would come back to the board. Under the proposed policy here, it would be delegated to the superintendent and her team to name an existing room. So there's a difference between obviously a room in a building. I'll use the example that's closest to us, which is Apopka High School. If you're renaming the 400 building or the 500 building, that would be under the existing schools, buildings, facilities. If you're renaming the press box or an individual classroom or an individual media center, that would be under the individual rooms on campuses portion of the policy down below, in subsection 5B.
Follow up?
Yeah. God, I keep looking for it there. So you also later on talk about, when you're talking about the individual rooms, excluding stadiums and I believe performing arts. So what would that be? Existing building, like an auditorium?
With stadiums, performing arts centers, auditoriums, I think it's on the naming rights policy. It's the separate naming rights policy because those are such large rooms on campus, and those are susceptible to being named by sponsors who will give contributions for that. So that's what that is anticipating.
Okay. I think I understand that for stadiums. I'm struggling a little bit with auditoriums or performing arts centers, just because I'm not familiar with, like, in my experience in the past, like I'm thinking about my own high school. We named our performing arts center after a chorus teacher that started the program. It was significant for 20 years, blah, 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 blah. And I know we've already had a request for one at one of my schools. So for the same reason, someone that's made contributions. So I'm a little confused about that for performing arts centers.
So there could be a possibility, like especially our performing arts magnets, right? Some company may want to say, hey, we're the sponsor of Dr. Phillips' Performing Arts Magnet, and I want to name it, after XYZ Corporation, or let's say Universal Studios. Sorry, Universal. And if you're willing, absolutely, right? Just throwing that out there. But if Universal Studios wanted to come and name it the Performing Arts Center, Dr. Phillips, after them for sponsorship, this would keep it open for that.
One question I have, Mr. Palmery, is under number 2, new schools, buildings, facilities, real property. When naming school buildings, facilities, or real property, the superintendent shall present 3 recommended names based upon input from the community stakeholders. So going back to community stakeholders and your comment earlier that we have community stakeholders for existing schools, where are we getting these community stakeholders, and are we going to have the same criteria?
So the community stakeholders, I guess, for new schools would be once you have gone through the zoning process and rezoned, and now you know who that community is. You know where the attendance zones are. That's when you would get their input. So it would be after the rezoning process.
Okay. Member Gould.
Would this policy allow for your example of a performing arts center to live side by side with an honoree? So say that if there was someone named after it, but the Universal still wanted to sponsor it. So let's say it's, Universal Performing Arts Center at the,
So the example, like, I know, I'm sorry if my examples are going to be Apopka-centric, but I know it, and it's my people. We have, the football field is named after Roger Williams. So they're in the process of working through naming rights on that. So it'll be the company's name stadium at Roger Williams Field. So I could see the exact example of Universal Studios Performing Arts Center, and it could be the Mrs. Smith stage at the Universal.
okay.
Yeah, you could do that.
Okay. Yeah, because I wouldn't want to preclude that opportunity. And in fact, the right name associated could actually attract sponsors. So it's, okay. Thank you.
All right. I'm not hearing any recommendations for changing what we have. We're just wanting to clarify so we can move forward.
Okay. Down to paragraph number 4.
How many paragraphs? Just
I
kidding.
think there's 5. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
All right. For the purpose of the policy, the phrase community stakeholders may include staff of the school, students attending the school, parents or legal guardians of students attending the school, community members with attachment to the school, members of the parent-teacher association or similar groups. We have PTOs, PTAs, PTSAs. It covers the whole gamut. A member of the school advisory council, because that includes members of the community as well, or alumni, and neighbors with a property in the school's attendance zone. So that's what we're defining as community stakeholders.
All right. Member Gould? Is this from before? All right. Any questions, concerns, input? Nope. Number 5.
Down to the paragraph 5B. This is the individual rooms on campus. The board delegates the naming of individual rooms on campuses, i.e. cafeterias, cafetoriums. That's going to be changed to cafetoria because of my predilection for Latin. Libraries, media centers, or offices, exclusive of stadia, gymnasia, and performing arts center, to the superintendent or designee. The same process for renaming existing schools, buildings, facilities, and real properties is applicable to individual rooms on campuses, with the exception of board approval. So that means you all will be out of the process for individual rooms. Individual rooms on campuses may be named after persons still living. Any renaming of an individual room on campus shall ensure that the person has substantial connection to the school or school district. I think here would be a good place to replicate the language we've had previously with respect to substantial impact on public schools that we talked about, so we will change that. The superintendent or designee reserves the right to remove a name given to the individual rooms on campuses if, in the judgment of the superintendent or designee, continuing to name the individual room on campus would bring adverse attention and publicity to the district and or the school board. So if we named a room after a person who was still alive and that person were to get arrested and the superintendent determines that, yeah, we probably don't want that room to be named after that person anymore, it would give her or him the authority to do so.
Okay. Any questions, concerns? All right. Move on.
And then the rest of the paragraphs are just technical changes, adding in real property and cleaning up language. So that would be the end of the policy.
Actually, I do have a question. I may be misunderstanding this, but going to the definition of community stakeholders.
Paragraph 4. Sylvia, could you? Thank you.
The phrase community stakeholders may include staff of the school, students attending, community members. So we use community stakeholders in number 2, which is new schools. May include. Okay, I'm okay. The 20% only applies to existing buildings. Okay, that's where I was, getting hung up. All right, no comments or concerns there? Okay,
Then we are through with the policy.
all right. Dr. Vasquez, we'll go back to you.
And Madam Chair, just
Yes.
when I'll revise this and I'll send it and circulate it out to all of you. If there are any concerns after I circulate it, let me know. I think I'll capture it correctly, but in case I don't, please let me know.
All right, will do. Dr. Vasquez, I believe we are on the ESE update. Is correct? Thank you. You're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A few weeks ago, the board requested a work session to be updated on our ESC department services that we are providing. And so I'm happy to turn this over to Ms. Wendy Ivory, who is the executive leader for our students with exceptionalities.
Ms. Ivory, we can't hear you for some reason. Not really. Is it on?
Okay.
That always helps.
It does, doesn't it?
The mics aren't great, but they're really, really not good when they're not turned on.
So
All right.
would you like me to stop after every slide for questions or wait till the end?
Okay, let's do this. When I see the board chiming in,
Okay.
I'll stop you at the end of either that slide or section.
Okay, perfect.
But I know it's difficult, pull it even closer. It's really hard to pull it close enough and still be able to read
Yes.
what's in front of you, I know.
I'll try it like
It
this.
is a
now.
challenge.
Is that
I-
better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good morning, Chair Jacobs, school board members, and Superintendent Vasquez. The Exceptional Student Education Department underwent an audit in 2021 focusing on areas concerning, but not limited to, professional development, IDEA funding and usage management, restraints, and vacancies. Today, we will be providing you with a quick update on the progress of the Exceptional Student Education Department, which will include the progress in some of the areas. In the last 4 years, the Policy and Procedures Department within the ESE department has worked diligently to develop highly skilled professionals, build trust with parents, establish consistent practices across schools, and assist schools in understanding and delivering free and appropriate public education, or FAPE, to students with disabilities. Here we outline the strategies we've employed to ensure FAPE for all students and showcase the data that indicates our positive outcomes. Considering the interconnectedness of policies and procedures, we concluded that targeted focus on specific areas is essential to develop expertise in all of our 240-plus schools. Individualized support is needed for all those responsible for compliance on each school campus. Individualized support includes the following: weekly, biweekly, and monthly visits by assigned district staff, modeling appropriate ESE meeting techniques, monthly monitoring reports for each school, which includes a snapshot of their monthly compliance components, daily access to a virtual help desk with a live district expert to answer questions, help resolve issues, and provide support to school-based compliance staff. Ongoing professional learning includes monthly training tailored to the trends identified throughout the district during a specified time of the year. Specific school-based training as a result of an internal audit, principal, or other senior leadership requests, or state complaint results. A variety of training is offered to include face-to-face, virtual, and self-paced Canvas courses to ensure the information is consistent and accurate. Summer training is also provided each summer to principals, assistant principals, staffing specialists, and deans. And consistent feedback clarifies expectations, provides guidance, and aligns efforts with goals. 4 to 5 years ago, Orange County Public Schools had the highest number of state complaints when compared to like-sized districts. In this chart, we see a comparison of the number of ESE state complaints filed in similar-sized districts. In the year 2021, we had 36 state complaints, with 17 identified as having findings of noncompliance. Fast forward to last year, we had a total of 22 state complaints, with only 4 of these complaints being identified as having findings of noncompliance. noncompliance. Within a range of the last 4 years, we've gone from 47% of our state complaints with noncompliance findings to 18%. Filing a state complaint is a parent's right. We understood that with over 20,000 ESE students in the 2021 school year, there were 20,000 opportunities for parents to file complaints. Our focus then shifted to making sure that findings of noncompliance were reduced. With the support of this school board and the superintendent, the ESE department has shifted to a downward trend, both in the number of complaints filed and the percentage of reports with findings of noncompliance. The ESE department intends to continue this trend by focusing on training and building capacity at each school. Schools will then be equipped with the knowledge and skills to ensure IEPs are being followed, parents are being afforded the opportunity to have meaningful participation, and students are being identified appropriately and in a timely manner. These strategies have shown themselves effective.
Can we hold for just a minute? Going back to that slide, this is really good news, and I'm impressed and pleased. The only thing that I may be misunderstanding this, but that would be helpful to me. So when we look at, let's look at 23, 24, 22 complaints, and we compare that to, I don't know, say Pinellas County with 12. I don't know how 22 complaints, if I'm just looking at the overall number of complaints, I don't know how big our ESE population is versus theirs. Is there a way to provide that information?
We would have to research it and look through that. But when you look at the actual number of complaints filed, we have over 20,000 ESE students.
Right.
So the farthest to the right column, which the 18%,
Right.
that's the number of findings compared to the ones complaints.
Right.
So with Pinellas having 12, they had more non-compliance.
Oh, that's a very good point. Yeah, and I could put a column at the end that would provide that information. It's still on a if you're looking at Miami-Dade County, they're so big. These numbers, candidly, are so small right now that I'm far less concerned than if we were looking at really large numbers, and then it would be important, I think, to the board to be able to see kind of apples to apples, how many do we have? But 20,000 ESE students, 4 findings. Be great to have none, but
We're working on that. We're working
of
on it.
course you are. And you're doing a phenomenal job, and that's a really big decrease from where we were. Vice Chair Gallo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The 20,000 for the ESE students, does that include our gifted students? Or is that just the students with unique abilities?
Just the unique abilities.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we're ready to move on. Next slide. Thank you.
Okay. An important trend to review is the number of private instructional personnel applications being submitted yearly, or PIPs. PIP application submissions have increased by 450% from the 2021 school year to the 23-24 school year, almost doubling every year. 89% of PIP applications for the 22-23 school year were for applied behavioral analysis, or ABA therapy. Private instructional personnel providing ABA therapy are allowed to be with their client in all areas of the school campus and classes once agreed upon by the school, the parents, and the private provider. The increase in private instructional personnel allows for more collaboration between public and private personnel to promote educational progress and assist students in acquiring skills, including but not limited to readiness for pursuit of higher education goals or employment. All private instructional personnel applications, including those previously approved, must be submitted or resubmitted annually. This is to verify insurance status, conduct personnel background check reviews, and update private company information. Once the application is reviewed by OCPS, a meeting is set up by the school with all parties to address the plan of action for the student. Private agencies are to provide supplemental support for students in the form of addressing ancillary concerns. The schools are responsible for providing a free and appropriate public education by supporting the student with all their primary needs.
Oh, I'm sorry, Vice Chair Gallo? Or is this from before?
So on the, when we look at the IDEA allocation and we look at the percentage, so basically what that is telling us is those are the push-in services that we're using to help support the needs of our ESC students, which means 88% of our IDEA dollars are literally going into the classroom in forms of teacher support,
Yes.
para support, behavioral specialists, those type of
School psychologists, yes.
that all benefit our students
Yes. Yes.
with exceptionalities. Okay, that's it. That's the only question I had. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, authorizes assistance to states to support the provision of special education and related services to children with disabilities and the provision of coordination of early intervention services for infants and toddlers with disabilities and their families, respectively. The support has to be in the form of supplementing and not supplanting FAPE district responsibilities. The intent of the federal government was to help pay for the education of students with disabilities by providing 40% of the average expenditures for them. The funding has consistently fallen short of the 40%. Last year's funding reached 14%. This slide represents the allocated IDEA funding that OCPS has received since 2021-22 school year and the percentage of the allocation spent on staff. Funds are allocated by 3 separate categories: public K-12, private schools, and pre-K ESC, to ensure that spending is proportionate. Schools can request funding for supplemental positions or items to support students with disabilities. If funding is available, school budgets are meticulously reviewed to make sure that the school has expended all their ESC allocations prior to approving a request.
Vice Chair?
Thank you, Madam Chair. 2 questions. With the slide before on the PIP, the applications, the 155 that were denied, can you just give do you have examples, just 1 or 2 examples of why a claim would be denied?
Sometimes they don't, their insurance wasn't appropriate, or they didn't fill out the application correctly. So we have people that work with them to try to get it fixed so that they can be approved.
Okay. And then my other question is when we look at the allocations of the dollars that we're giving federally, the IDEA allocation for public K through 12, the $46 million, do you have, how much above and beyond that do we spend on ESC services? So say above and beyond what we receive from the state and the federal government, how much other dollars of ours do we spend? For example, I was talking to one of my fellow board members in another district, and they said that they spend over a smaller district than ours. They spend $100 million more than what they're actually provided to ensure the services of ESE students are realized, that they are provided, that those services are provided. So I was just curious, how underfunded are we when it comes to our ESE students based on what we're provided? And if you don't know the answer, you can get it to me. That's fine.
Are you talking about IDEA funds or?
Well, yeah, we can start with IDEA, but I'd also like to, because I think she was referring to IDEA. I think they spent $100 million more than what they are given for IDEA. So yeah, I was just trying to figure out how comparable, or if we're in the same situation as our neighboring district.
So I'm going to defer to Ian in a minute because he's the IDEA expert here. But I do know that, we were only funded 14% of IDEA last year from the federal government. I will say I can't go back to 2021 when it comes to budgeting for ESE because I wasn't in this role. But since I got into this role, I know that the superintendent does make it a priority and has made it a priority. Mm-hmm. And I know she's worked with you guys to do that as well. And that has helped tremendously with supporting our ESC students.
Thank you.
So Ian, you want to?
Just so you know, I'm not trying to be the rock. If you see one of my eyebrows, I have Bell's palsy right now. So
He can speak in the
The
microphone.
mic.
So in regards to IDEA, I mean, we spend whatever amount is here, but beyond that, it would be an earnest question to kind of ask, what do we do as a school district beyond IDEA or the regular weighted FTE?
Okay, if you could just, when you get a chance, get us that information. I think it's important for the public to know that we're not also using all funds available to us from the state and the federal, but that we're prioritizing it to the extent that this is how many of our other operational dollars that we're using to ensure that those students are getting their needs met. And I know it's a struggle, and I know we have some shortages, and I know we still have some work to do, but just so that the public understands that we are prioritizing the needs of our
Yes.
our children with unique abilities. Thank you.
And before we move on, one other data that we have, I think that's relative to this in terms of communication with our constituents is the audit that was done by Ms. Lindsay that provided a lot of information on the concerns that the dollars were not going to the students, and pointing out that in fact it is the dollars that would otherwise be going to our general ed population that so is subsidizing that, which I have no problem with, but I think it's important for our families to know that this is a significant priority and we are putting our money where our priority is. So I'm glad you asked. Back to you, Ms. Ivory. Dr. Ivory? Doctor, no.
No. Speech and language services has been riddled in the national trend of diminishing number of available therapists. This slide shows a review of the last 4 school years of speech and language school vacancies and number of contracted therapists during the 2021-22 school year. There were only 4 staff vacancies and 15.5 contracted staff, with the remaining staff being district-based. Over the next 2 school years, the school and staff vacancies quadrupled. The number of contracted staff had to increase substantially to cover these vacancies. As of August 23rd, 2024, the trend of vacancies continues and the amount of contracted staff continues to be on the rise. Schools with SLP vacancies cannot fulfill the provision of services as required by the IEP. The only way to lessen the impact is to hire SLPs. Currently, we contract with 5 companies that provide therapists and continue to recruit. So far this year, they've produced 69 therapists. Schools with SLP vacancies cannot fulfill the provision of services as required by the IEP. Nationally, there is a shortage of therapists that have been noted by the American Speech and Language Hearing Association, or ASHA.
And Member Gould, you're recognized.
So I realize the field is short, but what is, if you know this and if you don't know this, you can send it to us, the gap between what they can make working for a medical facility or others versus what we have the ability to pay?
Yes, I'm not sure of the gap, but we can find that out for you.
Okay.
I know it's pretty significant, though.
Yeah, I would say it's in the range of a 5-figure, 10,000 plus difference from what is out in the market. And that's going to, but at the same time, every time we contract, there's additional overhead fees. And we really need to kind of figure out how to manage that in the budget and through our processes. Because we need those people on site.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Member Gould.
Okay.
Ms. Ivory.
During the 23-24 school year, we created a mild to moderate team to address the growing need to lessen the achievement gap between our general education students and our students with disabilities that are in the general education setting for most of their day. These students are known as students with mild to moderate disabilities. The purpose of the Learning Strategies and Support Facilitation Project, which was rolled out to all middle schools during 23-24 school year, is to narrow the gap between students with disabilities and peers without disabilities, and to ensure that students with disabilities achieve annual goals as outlined in their individual education plans in an inclusive environment. Through a series of ongoing supports, the team is able to provide administrators, teachers, and parents with the resources necessary to ensure all students, especially students with disabilities, have a promising and successful future. These supports began for middle schools in 23-24 and include professional learning on evidence-based instructional strategies and best practices for learning strategies teachers and support facilitation teachers, along with their general ed partner teachers. Alignment of the BPI, or Best Practices for Inclusive Education Assessment, to School Improvement Plan ESSA areas of growth and inclusive scheduling to ensure natural proportionality in classes, as well as common planning time for ESE and general education teachers. Quarterly community of practice professional learning in order to establish collegial relationships and build capacity with instructional practice. Beginning of the year training for middle and high school ESE teachers to ensure routines and procedures, classroom organization, and building classroom community are priorities for efficacy of instruction. Development of curriculum resource materials, or CRMs, so that learning strategies teachers have access to lessons, content, and instructional resources, including training and coaching on mathematics foundational skills, parent engagement literacy events, and free literacy resources as well.
All right, thank you. Let me stop for just a minute, or let us stop for just a minute for Vice Chair Gallo and then Member Byrd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We used to, back in the day, have a, I don't know if it was called a parent advisory council for parents of students with unique abilities. Does that still exist? And if so, do they still meet?
Yes, we open it up every year because people move and change. So we just sent something out in the Deputy Stoops newsletter last week to start that process again for this year.
Of asking parents to serve?
Yes, yes.
Okay, when you get the list of parents that are serving on that, can you share it with the board, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And Member Byrd?
Thank you. And do you have any survey data, or have we surveyed our general education teachers recently about how comfortable they feel or how equipped they feel servicing their mild to moderate disability students? I'm just curious as to how they're feeling, because I know sometimes they get very overwhelmed by it and the struggle of balancing both. So I'm wondering, it looks like you're doing a lot. So I'm wondering if we have any data to show that they're feeling better or more equipped.
So I don't know that we have the actual data, other than maybe some things in the Panorama survey that's not really specific to it. But I do know that this team works very closely with both the gen ed teachers and the ESE teachers. So they're invited to numerous trainings, and we'll go in and coach them as well if they need assistance with their ESE population. So all that's available for them.
Vice Chair?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So if there was a teacher, I had a teacher recently reach out to me who's struggling. And I know that Dr. Vasquez is looking into it. If a teacher is struggling in a class where she has a lot of, several students with unique abilities, and she's really struggling, like she's doing her best, but there's constant interruptions to instruction. The other kids aren't learning, so basically we have all children are being impacted. Who should she reach out to get more resources? Like what should a teacher do? I know that they should talk to their principal, but say the principal's like, hey, my budget's tight, we're doing the best that we can. What would be the next option for this teacher to do to try to get help and the resources that she's needed in that classroom to ensure that all students are learning?
So we have the information later in the presentation, but what they can do, they can always email me, and I can provide them with who would be next. But there's also, we have a ESE website with widgets on it where they can click on it and ask for support. And we have a person that mans that, and they send a team out there to support them if whatever the needs are. We have different levels of needs. Some are behavioral, some are academics. So that all depends. But they can always email me. And I know the situation. We're working on that one right now. So
thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Ms. Ivory, back to you.
Okay. Feedback from teachers and administrators in this first year of implementation has been overwhelmingly positive, with some expressing appreciation for instructional resources that they can immediately use in the classroom, appreciation for building community and capacity with colleagues in a professional learning setting, and excitement about academic growth of their students. Specifically, middle school students with disabilities realized a gain of 4% in ELA proficiency last year and an 8% gain in mathematics proficiency. While there's still much work to be done, the fruits of teachers' labors can be seen in the gains made last year.
Vice Chair, is this from before?
It is, but I have a question.
All right. Just leave it up there, right?
Thank you. So the increase, and this is great news. We always love to see the numbers going in the right direction. The ELA, is this on the students that took the FAST, or is this on?
Yes.
So does this include the alternative?
No, this is just for the mild and moderate students.
Okay. Do we have data later that shows how the students that are on the alternative?
We can get that for you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, Ms. Ivory, you're recognized.
Okay. After facilitating the best practices for inclusive education assessment with middle schools, we were happy to notice a trend focused on common planning time for ESE teachers and general education teachers, as well as a need for improvement in the multi-tiered systems of support process, or MTSS. The team recognizes the importance of accountability as schools work to achieve selected BPI priority indicators. The team will meet with schools to create and monitor action steps to ensure continuous improvement. Over the course of the school year, 377 middle school ESE and general education teachers attended professional learning. Additionally, 66 teachers at 15 child care provider sites attended professional learning offerings to ensure that children ages birth to age 5 receive age-appropriate, evidence-based instruction and literacy. The purpose of the Behavior and Instructional Support Team for Significant Disabilities is to help all schools within OCPS and charter schools with behavioral and instructional strategies. There are 3 main types of support this team provides to schools. The support could be in the form of assisting by conducting observations, responding to requests for individual student support in cases in which additional support or strategies beyond what the teacher is using is needed for individual students, and providing side-by-side coaching to teachers to help them meet the needs of their students in their classroom. So, Vice Chair Gallo, that kind of answers that question you asked earlier. Beginning in the 2022-23 school year, to better support school staff, we implemented an ESE teacher ticket system for general questions or concerns, a request for support Google form for ESE teachers to request behavioral or instructional support for themselves, and a request for support Google form for school leaders to request behavior or instructional support for their teachers. The teacher ticket and request forms are found on the ESE ongoing support widget located on OCPS Launchpad. Each request has its own unique font color as shown on this slide. These are monitored daily, and support is provided based on the needs of the school. When a school is in need of behavioral and/or academic support for an individual student, the school submits a request for student support packet, and the support is provided. If a student is exhibiting unsafe behaviors, the school submits a crisis determination review form to request emergency behavioral support. No questions? Okay.
I'm sorry, if we can pause for just a minute. Member Farrar?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question for a teacher who, say, is in a gen ed classroom and has a child who has not been identified yet as having some sort of ESE issue or needing that help. But they're struggling with that child. They know that they need to be in a more exclusive classroom where they're getting the help that they need. How are those teachers getting that support?
So they can do the same thing, fill out the request for support. There is a process that we have to go through. We can't just place a child in an ESE classroom. We have to evaluate, get permission from parents, et cetera, and gather data. But they can request support from my team to go out there and observe and give them strategies, but we also work with the MTSS team on the gen ed side to do that as well. So it's a fluid process where if they're gen ed, they may not be ESC, they may not end up ESC, but they have some of those behaviors that are occurring. We can go out and help support with that. They just have to either email me or fill out one of those forms, and we'll make sure.
Okay. Because I have had several cases where a student is exhibiting behaviors that are just, it stops the entire class. And the teacher says to me, well, I've seen this since day one of the school year, and it's now April. And she said, but we have to document, and we have to have the procedures and go through this whole procedural plan. And she said, in the meantime, the rest of my kindergarteners are struggling. Is there a way that we can try to kind of fast track some of these that we know for a fact? Like, I walked in and they didn't even tell me who the child was, but immediately as the child is screaming on the floor, you know, they need more help and care than one teacher with a classroom of 18.
So actually this year, we started, we had a lot of kindergartners were coming in that are not ESC. And we have to be careful not to identify students ESC that aren't ESC, because that will put us in a whole different realm of trouble that we don't want to do that to students. So if we know the child is exhibiting, or they have something from a doctor that's stating that they have autism, what we've done is we've worked with the school psychologists and said, listen, can we fast track it, so to speak? Can we get the parent out here? The schools have done a great job in communicating with the parents. They've gathered the data quickly, but we have to follow certain procedures when it comes to data. No, it shouldn't take a whole year, but sometimes it does take time, especially if they're not gathering the data that we need to support that student's, assignment into an ESC classroom. So, but those are the questions and things that come up that they can always ask us, and we'll send somebody out there to assist.
Perfect. Thank you. You guys are always awesome. Just thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Ivory, back to you.
This data on this slide shows the number of tickets and requests for support submitted for the past 2 school years. So it shows you the teacher tickets on down to administrator requests, et cetera, and the crisis for behavior support. As we experience an increase in the number of students in crisis who are exhibiting very dangerous behaviors, we realized we needed a different approach to how we equip school staff to respond to these behaviors. An approach that has a keener focus on using evidence-based behavioral strategies during a crisis. To meet this need, this year we're rolling out Safety Care Crisis Prevention Training. Safety Care provides the tools school staff need for safe crisis prevention and management when working with individuals who might exhibit behavioral changes. Using evidence-based and practical techniques from applied behavioral analysis and positive behavior interventions and support, or PBIS, the Safety Care program provides the staff with trauma-informed care, compatible strategies for preventing and managing behavioral challenges. These strategies are appropriate for individuals affected by the developmental, neurologic, and psychiatric conditions, as well as individuals who have experienced psychological or sexual trauma. Safety Care promotes a reinforcement-based approach while teaching replacement behaviors and new skills, resulting in fewer incidences of dangerous behavior and less need for restrictive interventions such as restraints. Okay. Since the 2020-2021 school year, OCPS has reduced the number of incidents of restraint by a total of 80%, from 440 incidents during 2020 to 21 to 88 incidents this past school year. In addition, during the same time span, OCPS has reduced the usage of prone as a restraint technique by 93.97%, from 348 incidences during 2021 to 22 incidents this past year. The significant reduction in both incidents of restraint and the usage of prone is a result of the ESE department working closely with schools to provide extensive training and side-by-side support to ensure that restraint techniques are truly used as a last resort in cases in which the student or others are in serious imminent danger and the student's individual needs are being met in the least restrictive environment capable of meeting their needs.
Thank you, Ms. Ivory.
During the 22-23 school year, the ESE department developed a system to document and track professional learning opportunities consistently across all teams within the department. A master spreadsheet was created in which all professional learning opportunities are listed via spreadsheet tabs by each team. The ESE department professional learning opportunity spreadsheet is shared with all OCPS staff via the ESE ongoing support widget located on OCPS Launchpad. ESE professional learning opportunities are also advertised quarterly through memos posted on the Deputy Superintendent's SharePoint site. Topics include access points, autism, ESE paraprofessionals, support facilitation strategies, classroom management, behavioral de-escalation, crisis prevention, behavioral specialist training series, peer, Section 504 plans, new staffing specialist training, and assistive technology, just to name a few. We also hosted a week-long training for our international teachers to acclimate them to our processes, and we plan to do the same for our contracted teachers. In addition to the advertisement of all professional learning opportunities, participants are encouraged to complete an anonymous survey for each training they attend. These surveys are then reviewed by the facilitators in order to make adjustments to better meet the needs of the participants.
If we can pause for just a moment. On the previous slide about restraint, first of all, I want to acknowledge your leadership and your team for bringing these numbers down substantially. But I also want to pause for a moment. The entire board cared deeply about this, but I want to just pause to recognize our vice chair because as I recall, she's the one who kind of brought this to the board's awareness and really spearheaded it. So again, I don't want to diminish the whole board's concern, but I think from time to time, there's just times when each board member really kind of takes the lead. I can think of, I'm going to get myself in trouble because I'm about to name people out for different things and I'm going to miss something. But anyway, I just wanted to recognize your leadership on this. Thank you, and thank you. You're welcome. Back to you, Ms. Ivory.
Okay. At the end of each year, I ask the team to reflect on current practices and trends and data to determine how we can best support schools during the upcoming school year. The topics on the slide are some of the areas that we are focusing on this school year. The critical shortage of staff has had a significant impact in filling staff vacancies in Orange County. A keen focus on how to address these vacancies is one of our current initiatives. Out of the 180.5 speech and language therapists district-wide needed in OCPS, we currently have 18 vacancies. Our ESE Supplemental Service Department has worked diligently recruiting and working with 5 different vendors to close that gap. In the area of behavior specialists, 12 vacancies remain out of 157 positions. A potential solution is to fill those positions as soon as we get clearance from IDEA state grant administrators to implement our plan. In the area of ESE teacher vacancies, we've worked diligently with our vendors and have filled all but one of our vacancies out of 1,046 total positions district-wide. We have filled all 117 staffing specialist positions at the elementary school level. In the past month, we have trained and helped hire over 120 paraprofessionals for our severely handicapped positions. Over the last 3 years, we've hired 98 international teachers for ESE, and last year through our contracted vendors, we recruited and hired 12 ESE teachers and 8 ESE paraprofessionals.
All right, let's pause there for just a moment. Member Felder, you're recognized.
First of all, I'd like to just acknowledge you, Wendy and Ian, for your work. I recently received an email regarding a complaint about the speech, language, and pathologists and just problems that this constituent was concerned about. And I wanted to just commend you and to hopefully that those persons who are listening and understand that people who are hired in speech language pathologists, it's difficult to find them. And when you do find them, it's good, but we can't do anything until people come in and they're hired. We can't, just go, we're doing the best we can to make sure that we have those positions filled. But I want to commend you on only one vacancy out of 1,046. That speaks volumes for this district. And of course, our superintendent, who, along with her staff, have been diligently working on hiring ESC teachers, because that's a hard vacancy to fill. And then the elementary, 0. Oh my God, that's so impressive. And I'm hoping those persons who are listening and watching our session understand that if there's a vacancy, we have to wait until people come, or, go out, we recruit, do what we can do to get them in. But as a board member, I want to thank you for your work. And hopefully those persons who are listening, that they see the data. It's on the screen, that what we're doing. And I thank you, being a teacher myself. I understand that it has always been an issue trying to find enough teachers. And this does my heart good. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Felder. I don't want to look a gift horse in the face, but I still want to ask. Last year, with our speech language pathologist, do you know what the vacancy rates were last year?
We can find that out. It was pretty close to what it is now,
Okay.
if not a little more.
Okay,
But
thank
we
you.
have I think we have it on the slide.
That's all right. You can provide it to me offline.
right there.
Okay, and the board. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry.
So it was a
Thank
little
you.
less, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
The high number of state complaints with findings of noncompliance prompted the department to focus on ways to reduce these. It was clear that the staff in these positions needed the consistency of professional learning, consistent expectations of their implementation of policies and procedures at schools, and consistent parameters of job responsibilities. The first phase in this initiative was to centralize elementary school staffing specialists under the ESE department. This centralization would allow for consistency in the standardization of process implementation. During the 24-25 school year, we are expanding our efforts to narrow the achievement gap between our general education students and our ESE mild to moderate students by piloting in 8 high schools. The 8 high schools are Colonial, University, Boone, Ocoee, East River, Lake Buena Vista, Dr. Phillips, and Wekiva. These schools will receive the same level of support that was provided to the middle schools last year, as shown on the slide.
That's all. Go ahead. Sorry.
To address the need to better support our gifted students in high school, we're implementing a pilot that shifts the high school gifted consultation model from one in which the gifted teacher conferences with the students' teachers to a model in which the students receive direct consultation from a gifted endorsed teacher. The goal is to empower our gifted students to be their own advocate, while at the same time guiding them towards reaching their full potential.
Member Dr. Vasquez, we do have a comment or question from Member Byrd. Do you want to take that first? Member Byrd? Or that just popped up. I'm sorry. Member Byrd?
Thank you. I just wanted to, again, I know that I think members of my board feel the same way, but your work that your team has done in this area is tremendous. I was thinking about this the other day, actually, when I first got on this board 6 years ago. It was when, I believe, Member Castor-Dental, Member Jacobs, Member Gallo all got on the board at the same time. This whole situation was totally different. This was such a glaring place where we needed work. And the work that has been done over the last several years, in spite of dealing with a pandemic, is just really, really tremendous. The way that you have, and the way that you keep reflecting on issues that you can tell need to be addressed, and the way you are addressing those so directly, and then we're seeing great change. It's really, really tremendous, and it's doing great things for our kids. So I am so grateful for the work of this department. This is not an easy area. It's a struggle for everyone. And it's a challenge trying to make sure that all of these children with all of these learning differences, and that it's increasing, and we're seeing more and more with these learning differences and struggles and unique abilities, making sure that they all have the things that they need to be successful, and that the other children in these classrooms are getting what they need to, is quite challenging. So kudos to you and your team for your hard work. And I, as a board member who can remember what it was like when I first got on the board, are tremendously grateful for the work of your team. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say thank you as well. As Member Byrd stated, we have come a long way. I know that we still have a lot of challenges in front of us. I know that the needs of our ESE students are great, and they've only been exacerbated post-pandemic. And it's once they regress, it's difficult, and a lot of services were put on hold. So we have a lot going on. Your department has a lot going on, and you've handled it with grace.
Thank you.
You've handled it with perseverance. I talk to you all the time. You take my calls, so I appreciate that. But no, seriously, I just appreciate everything that you've done and everything that you do on a daily basis to try to ensure that every student in our community is learning. And I know that you have a heart for these students, because I hear it in your voice when I speak to you. And sometimes that's the most important thing we all could do, is to have empathy in our heart and do the best that we can to provide services for these students. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well said.
Thank you.
Member Ferrant.
I too just wanted to say thank you. I've only been on the board for almost 2 years, but when I first got on, that was one of the biggest things coming in my inbox were concerns from parents. And when I see that almost obliterated and like completely, I hardly see it. That's a huge testament to the hard work that you've done, and so thank you for that. I know that you are listening. I feel like anytime that I come to you or any of our board comes to you with a concern, you're on it. Like I trust I can send you a quick email and you're like, I'm going to take care of it. You listen, you're empathetic, and I really appreciate it. We needed somebody with your leadership to be in charge of this department. It's a huge need, and it seems to only be getting greater, which I would love to see, look further into. I think there's more than just, there's got to be a reason why we have 1 in 35 children are now presenting with autism. That's a huge problem in our country, and something I'd love to see changed. But thank you for being there for our families, our students, and you're making a huge difference. So I appreciate
Absolutely. Well, I have to give credit to my team, because they I couldn't do it without them. I mean, right here, he's here with Bell's palsy, and he's still clicking. So,
Yeah.
and I have some in the back, but they're amazing, and they definitely support. So thank you, though.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Member Byrd.
Thank you. I forgot to just mention how thrilled I am to see the new gifted pilot that you're doing in the high schools. That's always been a big priority of mine. I remember one day having a long conversation with Kathy Schuler about it, because we often forget these kids that we think are just going to be fine, and really they're often not fine, and they struggle a lot. And we see a lot of kids that, even kids that have some serious behavioral issues or drop out of high school. Many of them are actually very gifted kids, but they need a lot of help with everything, socialization, all of it. And a lot of them deal with anxiety and attention issues. And, there's just so much going on, but we've just often
Yes.
kind of, pushed into the side because we've got some bigger, more forward-facing problems. But so I really appreciate you making this a priority and doing this pilot in the high schools. And I can't wait to see how it goes, and hopefully we'll see some good successes out of it.
We already are. We're receiving emails daily about students that are reaching out to the gifted teacher and sharing their anxiety and things like that. So yeah, we're seeing a difference
It's so good
already,
to hear.
so.
Thank you so much.
Member Castrodeno.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to join the chorus of people who are thanking you for your work in the department. And I know that in high school, and a lot of times in middle school too, when it comes to students who are gifted, we simply give them accelerated classwork and classes. And I know that they need a lot more holistic support as well. Can you describe what this pilot looks like in the high schools, and which high school? I don't really know any details about it.
So the high schools, I can share with you, it's what Colonial High School, 9th grade gifted, the 9th grade center, and Wekiva 9th through 12th grade gifted students. And we worked with the high school department to determine which, because we have 2 people doing this right now, and we wanted it to be successful and not have a whole huge caseload and not be able to deliver. So basically there are 2 people in my department that are gifted endorsed, and they go out and they meet with the students that are on consultation, and they talk to them about what's in their EP plan. They ask them, it's almost like a mini counseling type of session. If they have some anxiety about things going on, if they're struggling in a classroom, that teacher may go and work with the counselors at the school or the other teacher. So it's really providing a different level of support for our gifted kids that, like you said, a lot of times is they're placed in advanced placement classes because they are high performing, but a lot of times there's some social things going on. So they work with them on that. And if there's a concern that like they're really concerned, they'll bring it to the principal's attention along with the guidance counselors, safe coordinators, and work with them on that. But it's just it's a person that they can talk to and trust. So they've worked to build trust with them. They each have a caseload of about 70 students that they work with at those schools. And we hope to expand it, but right now, like I said, we were trying to make sure that it was successful and it worked and work out all the kinks before we did that.
Member Castrodeno.
Yes, so do those resource teachers work with the parents as well?
They can, yes. If they'll call the parents if there's something that they need to discuss with them. And that's something we met with the high school office because we wanted to make sure that, Mr. Martinez was buying into what we were doing, which he loved the idea. And then we've met with the principal leaders, we met with the principals. And so those layers of what our layers of support are, we've shared. And parents is part of that. So if they need to reach out to a parent, they will, to have a conversation. But we're careful not to exclude the people at the school when we do that. So, it's a team approach.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, any other comments? All right, let me close out by also thanking Ms. Ivory, Mr. Gesundheit, the entire team. I can't get over the change that we've had. I agree that empathy goes a long way. I've always seen that empathy with Mr. Gesundheit as well. I don't know the whole team as well as I'd like to, but in all my encounters, it's been very positive, and they've been very, very supportive. But sometimes it takes even more than that. It takes persistence. It takes the right personality to deal with our families that are facing enough challenges in their lives. They really need our patience and our understanding. So all of that's gone a long way. Great work. And as you know, this matters tremendously to the board, and I know it matters to each of you. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Vasquez, anything else?
No, I was going to say thank you as well, but I'm so glad the board shared what they've been sharing with me, how pleased they are with your leadership and what you have been able to do to change a mindset, a culture around our supports and partnerships with parents in educating our students with unique abilities. And I know there's still work to be done, but I'm very pleased. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Chair, with that, we do have lunch that's available prior to the closed session.
Thank you. All right, thank you all. Meeting is now adjourned.